The hands I saw in the mirror weren't just etched with wrinkles and prominent veins. They were a roadmap of my life, each line a testament to decades of tireless building, nurturing, and sheer, unyielding survival. These hands had cradled my newborn children, flipped countless pancakes at dawn, and later signed multi-million-dollar contracts that shaped the culinary landscape of the Midwest. They had built something extraordinary out of nothing, an enterprise now valued at $47 million. My name is Margaret Sinclair, and at 62 years old, I am the founder and CEO of Sinclair Culinary Services, the largest institutional catering company in the state of Illinois. We proudly serve hospitals, universities, and corporate giants across the Chicago metropolitan area and beyond. And yes, I still go to the office every single day. But lately, when my own children, Clara and Marcus, looked at me, I saw something different in their eyes. It wasn't the pride or admiration I might have once hoped for. No, it was pity, thinly veiled impatience, and a distinct air of entitlement. It was as if I were a relic from another era, a valuable but outdated artifact they needed to quietly set aside. It wasn't always like this. Before Arthur, before the children, there was just me and my dreams. I had graduated from culinary school with top honors, my heart set on opening a small, exquisite bistro place where food wasn't just sustenance, but an experience, a symphony of flavors and textures. My mentors at the Culinary Institute of America had called me a prodigy, particularly with savory dishes that danced on the palate and desserts that whispered tales of comfort. But then I met Arthur Sterling, a brilliant, quiet history professor with a mischievous twinkle in his eyes and a laugh that could unravel any knot of anxiety in my chest. He was captivated by my passion for food, but even more so by the fiery spirit beneath my composed exterior. We fell deeply in love, and my grand culinary ambitions slowly morphed into the quieter, yet equally fulfilling, role of building a family. We settled into a charming, slightly rambling house in Evanston, a leafy suburb north of Chicago. Our life was a tapestry woven with intellectual discussions over steaming mugs of tea, the rustle of academic papers, and the joyous, sometimes chaotic, symphony of raising our two children, Marcus, then 15, and Clara, 13. Arthur's quiet intellect was the bedrock of our lives, his steady presence a constant comfort. He was my confidant, my biggest supporter, the one who tasted every experimental dish and swore it was the best thing he'd ever eaten, even if it was a catastrophic failure. Then, 30 years ago, my world had imploded with the sudden, cruel finality of a collapsing skyscraper. Arthur, still so young at 45, had collapsed without warning during his morning run, taken by an unforeseen aneurysm. One moment he was there, vibrant and full of life, planning his next lecture on the Roman Empire. The next, he was gone, leaving behind an echoing silence and a gaping void in our lives. The life insurance, meager by today's standards, barely covered the funeral costs. I was a widowed mother of 2 teenagers, with a substantial mortgage and virtually no savings. My career as a culinary arts instructor at a local community college, though fulfilling, had never been about generating significant income. It was a passion project. Now, that passion had to become a lifeline. It had to become everything. There were nights I barely slept, lying awake in the suffocating silence of our empty bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind a frantic carousel of worries. How would I keep a roof over our heads? How would I put food on the table for my growing children, whose appetites seemed to grow with their grief? The fear was a cold, constant companion, whispering doubts in the darkest hours. I tried looking for traditional work, cashier jobs, receptionist positions, anything that would bring in a steady paycheck. But without a traditional business degree, with a resume that largely detailed academic pursuits and culinary certifications, nothing paid enough to support us. The applications were endless, the rejections crushing. Desperation, cold and sharp, became my primary motivator. So, I went back to what I knew best, what I truly loved: cooking. I poured my grief, my fear, and my desperate hope into creating exquisite box lunches. Gourmet chicken salad sandwiches on artisanal sourdough, rich, comforting potato leek soup served in eco-friendly thermoses, and my signature lemon bars, tart and sweet, each one a tiny act of defiance against despair. They weren't just meals. They were carefully crafted experiences, imbued with the love and care I wished I could still pour into Arthur. I started by selling them to sympathetic neighbors, then to friends of neighbors, then to local small businesses that appreciated quality. Word spread quickly through the tight-knit community of Evanston, propelled by the delicious aroma of freshly baked bread and simmering broths. Within 3 months, my quiet home kitchen had transformed into a whirlwind of activity. The antique wooden table, once used for family dinners, was now perpetually covered with cutting boards, mixing bowls, and stacks of brown paper bags. I was waking up at 4 a.m., the first hint of pre-dawn light barely piercing the windows, cooking until 8 a.m., delivering orders by 9 a.m., and then, after a brief, exhausted pause, back in the kitchen by noon to prep for the next day. The aroma of roasted vegetables, fragrant herbs, and freshly baked pastries became the pervasive scent of our home, mixing with the lingering ghost of Arthur's pipe tobacco. I bought groceries in bulk, my trusty minivan, once used for ferrying kids to soccer practice, now overflowing with fresh produce, fragrant herbs, and industrial-sized bags of flour and sugar. The weight of the bags, the endless chopping, the constant cleaning. It was physically grueling, but each completed order was a small victory against the encroaching darkness. Marcus, tall and lean even at 15, helped load the heavy coolers into the car, his adolescent grumbling a constant accompaniment. He would complain about the early mornings, the smell of onions that seemed to cling to his clothes, but he still showed up. Clara, 13, always elegant and composed even then, grudgingly folded napkins, packed utensils, and painstakingly labeled containers. "It's embarrassing, Mom," she'd complain, her voice hushed, eyes darting nervously around the manicured lawns of our neighborhood. "What if someone sees me delivering food?" The sting of her words was sharp, but I swallowed it. We had no choice. We were a team, a desperate, determined unit trying to survive. They would help, even if they didn't fully understand the depth of our need, or the quiet pride I took in every perfect crust, every satisfied customer. After a year, my home kitchen simply couldn't keep up with the demand. It was bursting at the seams, overflowing with industrial-sized mixers, towering stacks of insulated food containers, and the constant hum of commercial refrigerators. The health department, though initially lenient with a single mother trying to make ends meet, was beginning to raise concerns about the volume of food being prepared in a residential space. I knew I had to expand. I rented a small, dilapidated commercial space in an industrial park on the edge of town, a building that had once been a small-scale bakery that had gone out of business. It smelled faintly of sawdust and spilled bleach, a gritty contrast to the aromatic spices and simmering sauces I conjured daily. But it had high-capacity ovens, ample storage, and the precious space I needed to grow. It was here, in this humble, unglamorous shell of a building, with peeling paint and fluorescent lights that hummed incessantly, that Sinclair Culinary Services truly began to take root. I remembered Arthur's words about planting seeds, about nurturing them, and I poured every ounce of my being into this new, arduous form of gardening. My first official employee was Isabella Rossi, an out-of-work pastry chef with a warm, empathetic smile and hands that moved with surprising grace. She had lost her job at a high-end French bakery that had gone under during an economic downturn. Isabella didn't just bake. She sculpted with flour and sugar, transforming simple ingredients into edible works of art. Her lemon meringue pies were legendary, her chocolate torts decadent masterpieces. She shared my vision, her dedication mirroring my own, and together, we navigated the exhilarating, exhausting chaos of a burgeoning business. We worked side by side, long hours, often sustained only by strong coffee and the shared laughter of two women determined to succeed. Isabella became more than an employee. She became a trusted friend, a confidant, a silent witness to my relentless struggle and slow, steady triumph. The turning point came a year later, when one of my regular clients, a compassionate emergency room nurse named Eleanor Vance, referred me to her supervisor at the bustling St. Jude's Hospital in downtown Chicago. They needed a reliable food service for their rotating staff lunches. High quality, nutritious, and available around the clock. It was a monumental leap. A terrifyingly huge step. More volume than I had ever managed. Stricter health standards, immense pressure, and a level of risk that kept me awake at night, cold sweat dampening my pillow. I spent weeks preparing the bid, meticulously crafting menus, calculating logistics, and refining my presentation. The day I walked into that sterile hospital conference room, my heart was pounding like a drum, but my resolve was solid. I poured my soul into that pitch, speaking not just of food, but of care, of nourishment for those who dedicated their lives to healing others. And it worked. I secured a small business loan, a sum that felt astronomical at the time, and plunged headfirst into the challenge, working even longer hours, bringing in temporary help, and pushing myself to the absolute limit. Within a year, Sinclair Culinary Services had secured catering contracts with 3 major clinics across the city, a burgeoning tech company in the bustling River North District, and several prestigious law firms in the Loop. I officially filed to incorporate, my culinary dreams formally recognized as a legitimate business. The scent of success, though still faint, was intoxicating. By the time Clara left for Northwestern University, her tuition fully paid for by my efforts, we were serving 12 regular corporate accounts and catering dozens of high-profile events monthly. I had paid off the mortgage on our house, bought a new, reliable delivery van, and put both my children through college without a single student loan. Not bad for a woman who had started with nothing but a stove, a few pots, and an unshakable will to survive. I thought, perhaps naively, that this accomplishment, this foundation, would be a source of shared pride. By the early 2000s, Sinclair Culinary Services had grown into something I never could have imagined back in that cramped kitchen in Evanston. We operated out of 2 state-of-the-art commercial kitchens, one in the West Loop, another in the bustling Fulton Market District, with a sleek downtown office and a full-time staff of nearly 80 dedicated professionals. Our client list read like a who's who of Chicago's elite: public schools, regional hospitals, 3 major tech firms, and even the formidable athletic department of the University of Chicago. We had even launched a successful line of pre-packaged gourmet meals, Margaret's Home Kitchen, for busy professionals who craved homemade taste without the work. Business was booming. Our reputation for quality and reliability unmatched. We were a well-oiled machine, respected and prosperous. And yet, despite all the outward success, something inside me felt hollow. Marcus had graduated from a prestigious business school in Boston and taken a high-paying job at an investment firm in New York City. He rarely called, his life a whirlwind of distant deals and demanding clients. When he did call, it was often to brag about a bonus or complain about a missed promotion, never to ask about the business, or even about me. Clara, after graduating from Northwestern with a degree in communications, came back home to Chicago, but only because her job search elsewhere hadn't panned out. She wasn't passionate about food or even marketing, which was the director role I'd created for her. In truth, she oversaw a part-time assistant and reluctantly signed off on flyers once a month. She saw it as a temporary placeholder, a stepping stone to a more glamorous, less hands-on future that would involve far less work. She'd spend hours on the phone, gossiping with friends, while the company's marketing strategy languished. Still, I tried. I told myself that maybe, over time, they'd grow into the business. I hoped that one day they'd realize this company wasn't just a paycheck, a secure inheritance waiting for them. It was a living, breathing entity, built from scratch with blood, sweat, and tears, infused with a purpose beyond mere profit. But neither of them saw it that way. They saw a resource, a means to an end, a bottomless well of money. Marcus moved back to Chicago after his second divorce, his once sharp eyes now clouded by a cynicism that seemed to have deepened with each failed relationship. He brought his young son, Owen, with him, a quiet, observant boy who reminded me so much of Arthur. Owen often gravitated to the kitchens, fascinated by the bustle and the aromas, something Marcus never was. I offered Marcus the CFO position at Sinclair Culinary Services, hoping that responsibility would ground him, give him purpose. He accepted, but his attitude made it abundantly clear that he thought he was doing me a favor, gracing my quaint little company with his Ivy League expertise. He saw himself as the financial genius who would take my humble catering company and turn it into a global conglomerate, dismissing my decades of practical business acumen as charming but outdated. His ideas were grand, often reckless, focused on speculative investments and risky ventures that went against every conservative financial principle I had ever adhered to. He spoke of leveraging assets and aggressive expansion with a gleam in his eye that terrified me, reminding me of a gambler at a high-stakes table. Clara, meanwhile, married a successful, if somewhat arrogant, corporate lawyer named David Maxwell. Their life became a meticulously curated spectacle of social climbing, leisurely brunches at exclusive clubs, and endless school committees for their twin daughters. She came into the office when she pleased, rarely more than 4 hours a day, often calling in sick with vague ailments or claiming her daughters were always coming down with something. Her marketing initiatives were often more about self-promotion than genuine business growth, leveraging the company's name for her personal social media brand. She was a digital influencer in her own mind, using my hard-earned reputation to boost her online persona. The constant stream of selfies and product placements on her social media, often featuring Sinclair Culinary Services food in the background, felt like a cheapening of everything I had built. I started to see what I hadn't wanted to admit, what I had desperately tried to ignore. My children didn't love the company. They didn't respect it. They tolerated it. They expected, one day, to inherit it, to simply take the reins of a multi-million-dollar enterprise, but they had absolutely no interest in truly learning how it worked, how fragile its success really was, or the immense effort required to sustain it. To them, Sinclair Culinary Services was an empire waiting to be handed over, a golden goose that laid eggs without effort. To me, it was my life, my legacy, a tangible manifestation of my resilience and Arthur's quiet wisdom. It was Arthur's unwritten story, the one I had dedicated my life to completing after his untimely departure. But I still hoped, I still believed that maybe, with time, they'd come around, that they'd remember where it all started, in that tiny kitchen, with those desperate, hopeful box lunches. What I didn't realize, with the terrible clarity that only hindsight provides, was that they weren't planning to grow into the business. They were planning to take it from me. And sooner than I thought, the whispers grew louder, more insistent, like a rising tide. It started with little things. Marcus would subtly undermine my decisions in meetings, framing my cautious approach as old-fashioned or risk-averse in front of younger executives. He'd push for investments in flashy, unproven tech startups instead of core business improvements. Clara would casually refer to the company as our inheritance in front of other employees, or openly scoff at my long hours, suggesting I take it easy or enjoy retirement as if I were a frail, doddering old woman. They began to speak in coded phrases, whispers about succession planning, modernizing leadership, and next-gen transition, always with their eyes on me, judging my every move, my every gray hair a silent accusation of my supposed obsolescence. They spoke of my well-deserved rest, which felt less like a caring suggestion and more like a thinly veiled threat. The emotional toll was immense. Nights became restless, filled with the gnawing anxiety of betrayal. I'd walk the quiet halls of our home, the silence no longer comforting but suffocating, filled with the ghosts of Arthur's laughter and the bitter reality of my children's disloyalty. The loneliness was profound. I had built this empire for my family, and now my family was turning against me, using the very stability I provided as a weapon. How could my own flesh and blood treat me with such cold calculation? It broke my heart, piece by piece, but with each break, a new resolve hardened within me. I was not just a mother. I was a CEO, a survivor, a fighter. Then came the restructuring. Marcus, with Clara's enthusiastic backing, proposed a complete overhaul of the company's legal structure, ostensibly to optimize tax efficiency and prepare for future investment. It was a complex web of holding companies and limited partnerships, designed, he claimed, to protect our assets from unforeseen market fluctuations. He presented it with a slick PowerPoint presentation, full of impressive jargon and dizzying diagrams. But my gut, honed by decades of navigating the intricate currents of business, screamed betrayal. The numbers felt wrong, the language too convoluted. I looked at their eager faces, so confident in their deception, and a cold certainty settled over me. This was it. I hired an independent financial consultant, a sharp, discreet woman named Miss Eleanor Vance, no relation to the nurse, to review Marcus's proposal. Her report confirmed my fears, stark and undeniable. The restructuring would effectively dilute my controlling shares, transferring substantial ownership and decision-making power to Marcus and Clara, leaving me with a minority stake and little more than a ceremonial title. It was a coup, disguised as corporate strategy, a bloodless takeover cloaked in legalese. They were not just asking me to retire, they were trying to steal my life's work. I confronted them in my office. The panoramic view of the Chicago skyline, a jarring contrast to the tempest brewing within my four walls. The glass tower gleamed in the afternoon sun, reflecting the city's vibrant energy, while inside, my family was tearing itself apart. "What is this, Marcus?" I asked, holding Eleanor Vance's damning report, its pages heavy with the weight of their deceit. My voice, usually steady, trembled with a mixture of anger and profound hurt. "This isn't about tax efficiency. This is about stripping me of control. This is about theft." Marcus, seated across my polished mahogany desk, leaned back in his chair, a carefully practiced nonchalance on his face. Clara stood beside him, her arms crossed, a defiant smirk playing on her lips, her eyes cold and calculating. She wore a designer suit, her hair perfectly coiffed, a picture of effortless success that masked her parasitic intent. "Mom, be reasonable," Marcus began, his voice calm, patronizing. He looked at me as if I were a child who couldn't grasp simple concepts. "You're 62. You've worked hard. It's time for you to enjoy your life. Let us handle it. We're young. We have fresh ideas. We can take Sinclair Culinary Services to the next level, something you couldn't possibly do at your age. Your generation just doesn't understand the digital economy." Clara chimed in, her voice dripping with condescension, her words a blunt instrument. "Exactly, Mom. We appreciate everything you've done, truly. Building this company was a noble effort for your time. But the market is evolving. We need aggressive leadership, someone who understands the new landscape, someone with energy. You've done your part. Now, it's our turn. You can retire comfortably. We'll set you up with a generous stipend. You can travel, pursue your hobbies, whatever you like. Just sign the papers." The words hit me like a physical blow, each one a fresh stab to my heart. "My hobbies?" I repeated, my voice rising, trembling with indignation. "This company is not a hobby, Clara. It's my life. I built this from nothing. I poured my soul into every meal, every contract. I sacrificed for this. For you." My voice cracked on the last word, the pain too raw to hide. "Yes, and we're very grateful," Marcus interrupted, his tone dismissive, waving a dismissive hand. "But gratitude doesn't run a multi-million-dollar business, Mom. Frankly, your old-fashioned methods are holding us back. This isn't your tiny kitchen anymore. This is a corporate empire, and it needs to be run by people who are ready for the future. People who are willing to make the tough decisions. People like us. People who aren't afraid to take risks." He gestured vaguely at the city beyond my window, as if claiming it as his own. "So," I said, my voice dangerously quiet, the calm before the storm, "you're telling me to get out, that the business is yours." Clara's smirk widened, a cruel, triumphant twist of her lips. "Precisely, Mom. It's time for you to gracefully step aside. The business is ours now. It's our inheritance. It's what we deserve, after all the sacrifices we've made putting up with your old-fashioned ways." Her eyes, usually so calculating, now held a cold, unwavering resolve. They were truly ready to discard me, to sweep me aside like an inconvenient piece of furniture. A profound sadness washed over me, deeper than any anger. My own children, the flesh and blood of my heart, were betraying me, driven by a raw, naked greed I barely recognized. I looked at Marcus, then at Clara, seeing not the children I had raised, but two strangers, two vultures circling the very legacy I had painstakingly built for them. But even as the pain seared through me, a flicker of something else ignited deep within, a familiar, burning defiance. They didn't know me. They didn't know the Maigret who had faced destitution and built an empire with sheer grit. They thought they had cornered me. They were wrong. Terribly, foolishly wrong. "Get out?" I said, my voice gaining strength, each word a stone falling into place. "The business is yours? We'll see about that. You underestimate me at your peril." They laughed, a cold, dismissive chuckle that echoed in the luxurious office, bouncing off the glass walls. "Don't be dramatic, Mom," Clara scoffed, rolling her eyes. "It's a done deal. We have the papers ready. All you need to do is sign, and then you can go enjoy your golden years." What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was the silent, meticulous preparation I had undertaken over the past few years, ever since the first tendrils of their entitlement began to wrap around my company. Arthur, in his quiet wisdom, had taught me a valuable lesson long ago. Always have a contingency plan. The most dangerous opponent, he'd often said, his eyes twinkling as he spoke of ancient military strategies, is the one you underestimate. The one who hides their true strength behind an unassuming facade. He was talking about forgotten Roman generals and hidden alliances, but his words resonated in my very real, very personal battle. I had taken his lessons to heart, weaving them into the fabric of my own defense. My tenure as a culinary arts instructor had involved more than just teaching cooking. It had required extensive grant writing, budget management, and navigating complex university bureaucracy. Later, as I built Sinclair Culinary Services, I had become intimately familiar with every facet of corporate law, from intellectual property to complex contractual agreements. I had always been meticulous, a planner by nature, and their growing impatience and thinly veiled insults had only sharpened my instincts. I had quietly, deliberately, engaged the services of a brilliant, albeit notoriously private, attorney specializing in corporate succession and intellectual property, Miss Genevieve Moreau. Genevieve was known for her unyielding resolve and her uncanny ability to find loopholes where none seemed to exist. She was the one you hired when you wanted to win, no matter the odds, when you needed a surgeon with a legal scalpel. Over the past year, as Marcus and Clara's attempts to sideline me grew bolder and more brazen, Genevieve and I had worked in tandem, often in secret, late-night calls after the office was empty, or in discreet meetings at her downtown firm. She had meticulously reviewed every single document Marcus had ever put before me, every corporate filing, every partnership agreement, tracing the convoluted paper trail he had left. What she found was a trail of subtle, but significant irregularities. Inflated expense reports for phantom consultants, questionable marketing fees paid to shell companies, and outright violations of corporate governance that, while perhaps not immediately criminal, certainly breached their fiduciary duties and could lead to devastating civil penalties for the company. The deeper Genevieve dug, the darker the picture became. She even uncovered a secret, personal line of credit Marcus had taken out, using company assets as collateral, without my knowledge or proper board approval. He was siphoning off funds for his own failing investments, funneling company money into his personal ventures, jeopardizing the very foundation I had built, jeopardizing the livelihoods of all our dedicated employees. Furthermore, realizing their true intent, I had quietly initiated a complete reorganization of Sinclair Culinary Services' core intellectual property. All of my original recipes, my proprietary culinary processes, and even the Maigret's home kitchen branding were transferred to a newly formed separate entity, a private trust fund in my name. This trust, unknown to Marcus and Clara, held the true essence of the company's value, the very heart of its culinary innovation. It was a legal fortress, impenetrable and unassailable. Without my unique recipes, my specific preparation methods, and the established brand name, Sinclair Culinary Services was just a logistics company with industrial kitchens and a list of clients. They could take the physical assets, the trucks, the buildings, the staff, but they couldn't take the soul of the business, the intangible value that Arthur and I had so carefully cultivated. They couldn't take my legacy. One chilly Tuesday morning, 2 weeks after their humiliating ultimatum, I called an emergency board meeting. The invitation, sent through official channels, offered no explanation, only the cryptic subject line, "Urgent matters regarding company future." Marcus and Clara arrived, their faces radiating a smug confidence, an almost palpable anticipation of their impending victory. They expected me to formally announce my retirement, perhaps a tearful farewell, before handing over the reins. They were armed with binders filled with presentations about their vision for the future, filled with hollow buzzwords and empty promises of synergistic growth and disruptive innovation. The boardroom was tense, the air thick with unspoken expectations. My loyal employees, some of whom had been with me since the early days, sat quietly, their eyes darting between me and my children. They sensed the shift, the underlying tension, and their loyalty was palpable. They knew who truly built this empire, who genuinely cared for them. Isabella, my first employee, met my gaze across the table, her eyes filled with concern and a quiet strength that mirrored my own. "Thank you for coming," I began, my voice clear and steady, devoid of the tremor they expected, devoid of any sign of weakness. "As you know, my children, Marcus and Clara, have expressed a desire for a change in leadership, believing my age to be a barrier to future growth and an impediment to modern business practices." I paused, letting the loaded words hang in the air, watching their smug expressions, seeing the self-satisfied smiles on their faces. Clara smiled, a condescending nod on her face. "Mom, there's no need to belabor the point. We're all in agreement here, I believe. It's time for a new chapter, a fresh perspective. We've discussed this." "On the contrary, Clara," I said, my eyes locking onto hers, my gaze unwavering. "We are far from agreement. Because this isn't a new chapter, it's an intervention." The room stiffened. Marcus's casual posture evaporated. He leaned forward, a flicker of confusion, then alarm in his eyes. Clara's smile faltered, her perfectly manicured hand subconsciously going to her throat. "Before we proceed with your proposed restructuring, Marcus," I continued, my voice gaining a steel edge, "I have a few announcements of my own." I gestured to the door, and Miss Genevieve Moreau entered, her presence commanding immediate respect. She carried a stack of dark, meticulously labeled binders, each one a ticking time bomb. She moved with purpose, her movements precise and confident, placing one binder in front of each board member. "Good morning," Genevieve stated, her voice sharp and precise, cutting through the sudden silence. "My name is Genevieve Moreau, and I represent Margaret Sinclair. My purpose here today is to clarify certain misconceptions regarding the ownership and operational integrity of Sinclair Culinary Services." Clara laughed, a nervous, brittle sound, trying to dismiss the gravity of the situation. "Mom, what is this? Some kind of theatrics? We're not playing games here. This is a legitimate business meeting." "This is no game, Clara," I replied, my voice chillingly calm. "This is reality. The reality you so carelessly tried to manipulate. Genevieve, please proceed." Genevieve opened her binder, her eyes sweeping across the room, lingering for a fraction of a second on Marcus and Clara. "First," she began, her voice resonating with unassailable authority, "it has come to our attention, through extensive forensic auditing, that certain individuals within leadership have engaged in unauthorized financial activities, including personal loans, secured against company assets without proper board approval, and the fraudulent inflation of expenses through a network of shell corporations. These actions constitute a severe breach of fiduciary duty and, frankly, verge on criminal fraud under federal and state law." She projected a series of damning spreadsheets and transaction records onto the large screen, each line item a direct accusation against Marcus, clear and irrefutable. His face turned from pale to ghastly, his jaw hanging open, his eyes wide with a dawning terror as he saw his meticulously hidden schemes laid bare for all to see. He stammered, attempting to protest, but no coherent words emerged. Second, Genevieve continued, her voice unwavering, as Marcus's half-formed protests died in his throat, we have uncovered a pattern of deliberate attempts to devalue Sinclair Culinary Services' intellectual property, with the clear intent of acquiring it at a reduced rate or circumventing existing ownership agreements. She then dropped the bombshell, the blow that would truly decapitate their plans. Therefore, as of this morning, Margaret Sinclair has formally transferred all proprietary culinary recipes, unique preparation methods, and the exclusive rights to the Margaret's Home Kitchen brand to a newly established private trust, over which she retains sole and undisputed control. This trust, which holds the true intangible value and distinct identity of this company, is entirely separate from Sinclair Culinary Services' current corporate structure. Without these foundational elements, the very heart of its culinary innovation, its signature taste, its unique identity, Sinclair Culinary Services, as it currently stands, retains only its physical assets, its logistical operations, and its client contracts. The very essence of its multi-million-dollar value, its unique culinary identity, its soul, is no longer part of this corporation. It belongs to Margaret Sinclair's private trust. Silence descended upon the room once more, heavier and more suffocating than before. This wasn't just a legal maneuver. It was a surgical strike, a complete and utter dismantling of their greedy ambitions. They had tried to steal the body of the company, but I had quietly, painstakingly, taken its soul and secured it in an impenetrable vault. Clara gasped, her perfectly composed face crumbling into a mask of pure fury and disbelief. Her mouth worked, but no sound came out for a moment. Then, You what? She shrieked, her voice cracking, high-pitched and raw. That's everything! That's the whole business! You can't do this, Mom! It's mine! It's our inheritance! Precisely, I said, a faint, sad smile touching my lips. My voice was calm, almost gentle, a stark contrast to her raw panic. It's the heart of the business, Clara. The part you never bothered to understand. The part you never valued. The part you thought was merely old-fashioned. The part I built, brick by painful brick, with my own hands, with Arthur's memory as my guide. It's what truly made this company worth millions, not just the buildings and the trucks. Marcus, finally finding his voice, was stammering, desperate, clutching at straws. Mom, you can't! This is illegal! It's extortion! You'll destroy us all! His carefully constructed facade of nonchalance had shattered, revealing the desperate, cornered man beneath. Illegal? Genevieve interjected, her voice sharp as a surgical scalpel. Mr. Sterling, all transfers were done legally, ethically, and well within Miss Sinclair's rights as the sole founder and primary owner of the intellectual property. What is illegal, however, are the fraudulent activities detailed in this report, which are now being forwarded to federal authorities. You and Miss Clara Sterling will be facing a comprehensive audit of all your financial dealings within the company, and I assure you, Miss, Sinclair is prepared to pursue the fullest extent of the law to recover any misappropriated funds and to ensure justice for the years of tireless work and dedication she poured into this company. Your attempt to seize control has merely hastened your own downfall. The air crackled with their stunned silence. The other board members, initially shocked, now shifted in their seats, their faces grim and uneasy. They knew a sinking ship when they saw one. They knew who held the real power in that room. Within minutes, the decision was unanimous. Marcus and Clara were immediately suspended from all company duties pending a full internal and external investigation. Their future vision for Sinclair Culinary Services had dissolved into a nightmare of their own making. The betrayal they had inflicted had come back to consume them. The weeks that followed were a blur of intense legal proceedings, exhaustive forensic audits, and rigorous damage control. The news, when it finally broke, was a sensational headline in the Chicago business papers, plastered across the front page. Culinary empire rocked by family feud. Founder alleges fraud against own children. Daughter and son under investigation. It was a public spectacle, humiliating for Marcus and Clara, their names dragged through the mud, but strangely liberating for me. The truth, ugly and painful, was finally out. The fallout was catastrophic for them. Marcus's past financial misdealings, now exposed and under federal scrutiny, led to his immediate dismissal from his previous investment firm, his reputation in the financial world utterly destroyed. The federal investigation into the fraudulent asset transfers began in earnest, threatening him with not just financial ruin, but severe criminal charges that could send him to prison. Clara's carefully curated social media empire, built on a shaky foundation of inherited wealth and manufactured glamour, imploded overnight. Her sponsors pulled out, her followers dwindled, and her lavish lifestyle, so dependent on Sinclair Culinary Services funds, evaporated as her accounts were frozen. Their grand, modern mansion in Hinsdale, once a symbol of their perceived success, became a gilded cage, a monument to their unchecked greed and ultimate downfall. The quiet dignity of their suburban pretense was shattered. For me, the victory wasn't about money. It was about reclamation. It was about vindication. It was about honoring the true spirit of what I had built, ensuring Arthur's quiet legacy of integrity and hard work was preserved. I restructured Sinclair Culinary Services, selling off some non-essential physical assets but reinvesting heavily in employee training, sustainable sourcing, and community outreach. The company, now leaner and more focused, began to thrive again, its reputation for quality and ethical practice shining brighter than ever. I even started an internship program for aspiring culinary entrepreneurs from underserved communities, teaching them not just the art of cooking, but the discipline of ethical business, the value of integrity, and the enduring power of perseverance. I saw potential in every young person who walked through our doors, a spark that reminded me of my younger self, and of Arthur's belief in the untapped potential of everyone around him. My grandson, Owen, Marcus's son, started spending more time at the office, observing, learning, his young eyes wide with genuine curiosity. I saw a glimmer of hope for a different kind of legacy in him. My relationship with Marcus and Clara, once strained, fractured completely. They were consumed by their own legal and financial troubles, their bitterness, a tangible barrier between us. There were no apologies, no attempts at reconciliation. They chose to blame me for their downfall, rather than acknowledge their own avarice and the devastating consequences of their actions. The pain of family estrangement was profound, a wound that might never fully heal. There are days when the ache of that loss is almost unbearable, a constant reminder of the dreams I once held for a united family. But beneath it, a quiet peace settled. I had drawn a line in the sand, protected my life's work, and refused to be exploited. I had honored Arthur's memory and, most importantly, I had honored myself. And sometimes, the quiet ones, the ones underestimated and dismissed, are the very ones who hold the key to the truth, the ones who deliver the most profound lessons. My Arthur, in his gentle wisdom, had seen that. He had taught me not just to survive, but to thrive, to foresee the unseen, and to fight for what I believed in. He left me not just the memory of his love, but the strength to protect my own legacy. And in his passing, he showed me and the world who I truly was, not just a grieving widow, but a formidable entrepreneur, a resilient survivor, a woman who refused to be written out of her own story. This story isn't just about a company, or a family feud, or the pursuit of wealth. It's about perception and reality, about the unseen battles fought in the quiet corners of lives, and about the unexpected power that lies within us when we choose to stand up for what's right. If you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or betrayed, remember that your quiet strength can be your most powerful weapon. Your integrity is your shield, And your truth, when revealed, can shatter the most carefully constructed deceptions. What you do in silence, the preparation, the observation, the unwavering commitment to your values often speaks louder than any public declaration, echoing through time and leaving an indelible mark. What battles have you fought that no one saw? How did you find your voice when others tried to silence you? Share your stories below. And remember, in the end, true legacy is built not with stolen wealth, but with honor, perseverance, and the courage to live your truth, regardless of the cost. The greatest inheritance you can leave is the example of a life lived with purpose and integrity, a testament to what can be built when love and resilience guide your hands.